Welcome to episode 126 of the Omnigamersclub podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including flipping a coin. I am Daniel Wynter.
And I'm Mark Uasa. And sometimes you flip a coin and it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So this is our second try at recording this episode due to technical reasons.
Well, shall we call this an omen for the success of the podcast, Mark? Heads or tails?
I'm going to say heads.
You got it.
I got it both times, so I don't know what that says about it. Anyways, let's just pretend everything's going to go just fine.
Excellent. It's fingers crossed. Yeah, so how are you doing, Mark?
Yeah, I'm well. Not too bad. Didn't get it up too much, but this past weekend, but I'm trying to think positive. I'm getting a lot of reading in, which is a good thing, so maybe I'll talk about some of that during dessert.
Yes, yeah, not a lot of games on my end either. Been busy with family commitments and job interviews and the like. Not least of which, though, this last week, my daughter has developed a bad fever. That is Pokemon fever. And she has fallen hard for that. So I think I'll be talking about it a little bit maybe in a future episode. But I have actually played the Pokemon card game for the first time. 30 years since I bought my first booster pack of the OG TCG. So I'll be playing a few more games of that, I think, and maybe on a future episode. Anyway, lots else to talk about today. 3 courses of games coming up. We've got our appetizer first. We talk about some sort of miscellaneous gaming topics. Mark, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, for my appetizer, well, why don't we start us off with the hardware news? So, I think mere hours after we had our last discussion about the PlayStation Portal and what's going on there, which I'm still excited about, there was a, kind of gargantuan announcement from Valve about not one new piece of hardware, but 3 new announcements. Going through them quickly, there's the Steam Machine, which is actually the second coming of the Steam Machine. They tried about a decade ago with not much success to put some dedicated kind of TV gaming console like PC out, but they're making another effort. And there's the second coming of the Steam Controller. This one looks actually a little bit awkward, but maybe slightly less so than the last one, which I did own.
I saw some comparisons to the OG Xbox Duke controller. It looks pretty chunky.
It does look kind of gigantic, but maybe that's all right, because some controllers feel a little bit small in grown-up hands. Let's be honest. And then the third piece of hardware they announced, which is a second Steam Machine, I guess you could call it. It's a standalone VR headset that can be attached to a gaming PC, such as a Steam Machine, and it is rocking a mobile chip, so not even a laptop based processor. So it's not going to be able to handle serious PC games, VR games, like even Half-Life Alyx will probably not run on this machine, but it can operate standalone to play lightweight games, and it could be like a virtual big screen TV. So that kind of excites me as well. Lots of exciting stuff going on. But I'm going to just say I'm not going to place any bets at this point. I'm going to be just cautiously optimistic because no price announcements. I personally think this is going to be fairly, on the higher end. It's not going to be $5.99 like the original Steam Deck was. It's probably going to be more in line with the PlayStation Pro sort of price, like maybe $900 Canadian, probably for the full-on Steam Machine. We'll know more soon. The devices are supposed to come out in first quarter next year, so we don't have long to wait.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking this last episode about the PlayStation Portal, and I had said that what I was really looking for was just something that would let me plug into the TV and access my Steam games there. Obviously, Gabe was listening 2 hours within that podcast releasing, and then this announcement came out. So yeah, I'm tentatively quite curious. I'm obviously not going to commit to a device before I see the sticker price. We'll see, but it's very much in the wheelhouse of something that I have been looking for, especially playing more games with my kid, and I want to open up some more options to my Steam library without being locked to the computer, and connecting that to the TV, I think, will be a good option. The VR headset, I mean, remain pretty cynical at VR, largely just from a motion sickness perspective. Half-Life Alyx is basically the only game I'd really want to play. The only must have on my list. So I don't know if this is really for me either. It does seem like it has some kind of wireless capabilities, somewhat limited, I think. But that would be interesting too, not being sort of tethered to your computer for it.
Yeah, I have some experience with the MetaQuest 3, which is a pretty decent little machine. It has fun experiences. I think it's great for some of the more lightweight stuff that's more, I don't know, physically oriented, like the supernatural, like the motion and exercise one is great. I think this is gonna kind of have a hard time. The Steam frame is gonna have a hard time just kind of explaining itself and what it is in the market because it is standalone, but it can't really run the heavyweight games. So we'll see how that goes. One detail I will like to spell out about the Steam machine that's positive, though, is that even Gabe Newell himself has said, like, this is just a PC. So this is not introducing anything new. You can go out today and get yourself official SteamOS and install it on a PC hardware that you own. So if on that day when all the hardware comes out in spring of next year, want to get yourself one of those new Steam controllers and install SteamOS on a PC you own, you can have a pretty similar experience, which I think is a great option for those people that are out there that want to test the waters. And on the flip side, if you do want to get a Steam machine and you're not big on the idea of Linux, you can go ahead and install Windows on it yourself. That option is available to you. It's not a complete open system, but it's much less of a walled garden than any of the other consoles out there. So I think this is overall, somewhat positive news for the game playing audience out there, and is slightly more consumer friendly than some of those walled gardens that exist out there.
Yeah. A balance between sort of plug and play, ease of use, and that customization is certainly likely to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of people. So yeah, we'll definitely be keeping my eye on that.
Yeah, we'll wait and see for more details. How about yourself? Do you have any news tidbits?
Not so much news. There has been news out this week for one. The Kickstarter union did announce that they've basically had their demands met, as far as I'm led to believe. I didn't read the full article, but I don't want to be a full news podcast here unless I have anything particularly to add to it. And like, that's great news. I love that for unions. But I don't have any much to add to that necessarily. So instead today I just wanted to double back to some smaller games that I've been playing. So I hinted at last episode, a lot of games I've been playing on the table, but haven't had time to sort of really commit to a full review and play with a wide variety of people. So what I'm actually going to do is a bit of a roundup of some word games. And since playing Cryptmaster recently, I was in the mood for refreshing the state of word games out there and just throwing up some options. I've only played a couple in the past. I just wanted to test the waters again and see how I feel on word games. So, the first one I want to discuss is one that I did play some years ago at one of the first Shucks. There was a demo there for a game called Spell Smashers. So this was from Christopher Chung and Renegade Games. And something that had always turned me off word games was it tend to be pretty dry and flavorless, for what it's worth. Like, there's not much theme or structure to them other than make a big word, get some points. You Scrabble varieties, basically. And this is definitely on the thematic end of the spectrum. There are monsters that have particular weaknesses. Sorry, cat interruption. There's like a town with a bit of not quite worker placement, but you can select an action to spend money on in the town to get certain upgrades and equipments, and a lot of different abilities that you're sort of balancing there. And it is quite fun. I did really enjoy it, to the point that I went out and bought one of the few copies that are out there. It didn't seem to do particularly well, unfortunately. And I did revisit it this last couple of weeks, and it is pretty wonky, I will say. It's like the economy doesn't feel entirely balanced. It feels like you need one more monster out there to like give you a choice in what you're going to do. But the artwork by the Miko and this all that flavor does add a lot to sort of bring you into that world. I won the game by spelling pantsed, fighting a vampire. So there you go. I think perhaps it could lean into that sort of doing some more thematic words rather than just spell whatever word you can. Maybe there's a like Cryptmaster did basically, and playing into that. I'd like to see a game play with that a little more potentially. One other one that I had tried in the past but revisited recently is Paperback. There's also the sort of sister game Hardback. I don't entirely understand the distinction, but they are both designed by Tim Fowers, and they're both deck building games with words. And it is incredibly dry, both in aesthetic and mechanics. It is not really a lot of theme there, other than like your, I guess, collecting these sort of penny novels, like the old-fashioned novels, basically. But the real charm of this game is that it's a deck building game. And much like in a deck builder, you're trying to build synergies. Here, you're searching for synergies within words, and like you're trying to build your deck with words, with letters that would regularly be used together. For example, like if you throw a Q in your deck, obviously you're going to want a U in your deck as well, or like S and T, I guess, tend to go pretty well together. And so you probably craft your deck with a particular, if not a particular word in mind, but a particular sort of grouping of words in mind, and trying to zero in on drawing the right cards for that. Have you played either of those, Mark?
Yeah, I played a little bit of Paperback. I think I have it or had it in app form. I don't recall whether that
Right.
was on PC or mobile, but I thought the idea of it was pretty interesting. And if you're okay with the idea, I might want to borrow a copy of that from you because I think that might be a good option of a game to play with my wife, who's not much of a tabletop game player, but likes word games, like the New York Times type, Wordle and things like that. So I think that might be a good middle ground to, appeal to both sides of the party.
Yeah, I do have the old edition of Paperback here that I'm happy to lend you. There's been various editions. I did just upgrade to the Paperback Adventures. It's like a solo or two-player cooperative game that I've heard good things about. It has a little more structure and theme to it. So I'm very curious to see how that compares. But in the meantime, one other highlight that I've been enjoying is a game called Illiterati. And that is from Gary Alaka, Rob Chu, and John Kang. And it is a cooperative word game. Similar to something like Scrabble, you basically get a bunch of tiles randomly that have individual letters on them. But rather than just spelling the biggest word you've memorized from the dictionary, you're given these challenge cards, basically. They will have a particular theme, like make words with financial terms or make words that relate to holidays, or it will have specific structural challenges like the word has to have a single vowel in the middle of the word, or it has to be what's the phrase where it basically reads the same forward and back essentially.
A palindrome.
That's the one. But yeah, those thematic challenges do like add a lot of charm to it, just sort of force you to think and improvise a little more, rather than memorizing particular words. I guess if you play this game enough times, you'll probably know you start to know what words work well with financial terms for meeting that challenges, for example. But the other thing I really like about this is that like if you can't form enough words to match that challenge, you can just form any words. Because you have to be, it has to be at the end of the round. You can't have any letters left over, or you take a penalty basically. So you have to make some kind of word just to survive through the round, and then hopefully you have some financial terms next round. But what that leads to is basically forming words that you can pull apart and rearrange. And like you might want to say you have you need some animals and you want to spell rooster, which you can't quite get to, but you might spell root for now, and just hoping for that that E&R at the end for the next round, and you can sort of pulling words apart and restructuring them. I think that's really satisfying. Again, similar to paperback, encourages you to think about sort of related words and similar words and just tweaking them ever so slightly. So I find that a pretty fun challenge. My daughter has had fun playing that with me. It does have a little bit of wonkiness in that there's these sort of Illuminati villains who are attacking you at the end of each round, and like they'll force you to sort of pull apart words or destroy words. And the rules are a little bit vague as to how that works exactly, because if like you draw multiples, they sort of cascade and trigger multiples at the same time, and the rules aren't quite specific enough for how to resolve that. But if you don't overthink it, you can probably figure something out. That game does have a couple of expansions coming to Kickstarter very soon, I'm led to believe. So I'll drop the link to that in the show notes. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that one as a more light-hearted sort of some thematic challenges and just the structure of thinking about words. I've been enjoying that.
Very cool. Yeah, I think board games can appeal to a lot of audiences, and although they're not my main thing, I can see the fun in them. So yeah, it's always good to know about some hot, fun word games.
Yeah, I mean, I've as I mentioned previously, I've long avoided word games just because I felt that I'm bad at them. Essentially, it is something that you have to practice to be too good at. Like it's, I mean, it comes naturally to some people, obviously, but a lot of that is just practicing, playing a lot of crosswords, I guess, to get those word skills up. And yeah, I'll be digging into Paperback Adventures soon, hopefully, and see how that compares.
Very nice. All right, I'd like to quickly mention one last piece of news that just crossed my ears of late. Basically, there's another case of credit card companies getting their sticky fingers into censoring potential games. You may recall, listeners, that basically there were some challenges with itch.io and payment processors like Stripe and MasterCard, basically, in effect, censoring games because they contained adult topics or sensitive topics from that platform and others. And it sounds like that's rearing its ugly head again. Publisher Xseed Games has announced that they'll be canceling their Corpse Party Tetralogy pack. So Corpse Party is a series that's been around for a while, sort of horror themed, kind of dark humor, I believe, involved there as well. I haven't played any of these either. I'm just more interested more from a censorship perspective. And of course, there are questionable topics that not everyone will enjoy, but I'm of the opinion that you should let people decide for themselves what is reasonable or not. And certainly shouldn't leave it to payment processing companies to determine what's correct or not. So this is just affecting the Western market. The games are still being released in other regions like East Asia. Apparently that there is a Asian edition. So this is basically like the region that's not Japan or mainland China, that will have English language capabilities. So if you wanted to import this game, you still can get it, but it won't be available at your local game store or online retailer in the North American or European markets, unfortunately. So that's the Corpse Party Tetralogy pack from Xseed Games, unfortunate victim of some more censoring shenanigans.
I'd missed that particular bit of news, but I did hear some discussions in relating to, I think it was Square Enix and Ubisoft, some sort of controversies there the last week. And basically how this sort of censorship, it's not just the explicit limitations on not including games of particular themes or topics, but it can really have this sort of soft effect on people not wanting to make those games to risk it, basically, and just discouraging these studios from taking the risk, essentially, because most of these big publishers are pretty risk averse, especially right now. So it's unfortunate to see. It's going to hurt, continue to hurt marginalized people more so, obviously. So yeah, it's hard to fight this when it's coming from the top down at from the payment level, essentially.
Yeah, I think there was this was a little while ago, but there's this new-ish podcast called Post Games. It features one of the members of I think it was the Besties. Yeah, Chris Plant. Chris Plant. One of the episodes, one of the earlier episodes, is about NSFW games. So very, really fascinating, and like just like you said, there are some small indie game makers whose entire business is, saucy games, spicy games for another word. So obviously, this directly affects them. Who could devote, all of their, maybe this is a side gig of theirs, all of their spare time to produce this to scrape out a living, and it turns out that you can't sell it because you can't get paid for it. That's a nightmare scenario. So, really, I guess this is a topic of our times. In the past, you had just large publishers like Sega and Nintendo controlling what game could be published, and they had their whatever Nintendo seal of approval, and then they created the industry board ESRB. But indie games are here to stay, and I think they're a net positive in this generation when there's so many large publishers just closing and canceling, closing studios and canceling games left, right, and center. Indie games could be the central lifeblood of games, or of more innovative, smaller games, certainly for the future. But that can't be the case if you snuff them out because they can't afford to make a living.
Yeah, we were talking last episode about the games in the context of the playtesting. I was discussing and how these truly indie designers can create games that are outside of the traditional publisher sort of framework, and truly special, unique games that just aren't feasible within the traditional structures, shall we say. Yeah, it's really innocuous the way that these, huge forces are basically trying to stop anyone from creating anything out there at the same time as, filling the void with AI slop that's, drowning out what sort of indie creators.
Yep, it's sad to see. So we got to fight that with every ounce of power we have, and we got to support indies any way we can. All right, what do you think? Should we move on to our main topics?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, would you like to start us off, or shall I?
I guess I will do it today. Let's see here. So, my main course for today is Diggergun. So, this is a video game, came out November 6th, 2025, so just a couple of weeks ago, designed by Kabloop, a pseudonym from a solo dev. Published by Grab the Games. So recently, Mark, you were talking about some demos that you played on the Steam Next Fest, and I'd at that time been digging into the furthest deeps of the thousands of games that always come out every Steam Next Fest, and there was a few high profile games that I played and enjoyed, but I really wanted to try and find some that were sort of off the beaten path, games I really hadn't heard of, and needed a little more spotlight. And a couple I'd found were clearly just asset flips, essentially. But the one that really surprised me was Diggergun. And I enjoyed it so much that I immediately bought it when it came out just a couple of weeks later. So, I mean, the first thing you'll see when you look at this is this incredibly striking pixel art. I mean, it's truly monochrome, just like black background, white pixels. I can't say what sort of era it's emulating specifically, perhaps like almost Game Boy-ish, I guess. It's still widescreen. It feels like it looks similar to some of the games you see on like the Playdates, that sort of new, relatively new handheld. There is some color, I should say. It's like very sparingly for emphasis, largely just completely monochrome pixel game, very simple. It is, as I said, striking to look at and quite well crafted in those pixels. All those designs are just incredibly sharp in each of those designs. So basically, what you're doing here is it's a mining game in the vein of like Dig Dug or SteamWorld Dig, where you're basically going into these mines that are single screen. constructed by like blocks, essentially. Lots of square rock blocks. There's some monsters crawling around. There's some various hazards, and then there's these lithium crystals, and you're trying to collect as many of these crystals as you can. And so that's broadly the trick. Like the core mechanics of this game are incredibly simple. Just like you have your digger gun, which you can use to break rocks and fight monsters. You can pick up crystals and avoid the traps. That's basically all there is to this game. But it really elevates those simple mechanics in some clever ways by just really ratcheting up the lots of tiny moments of friction. In that this is also a life sim. You are on a timer, like there you go through the days of the week, and it's the time is moving forward in real time, and like the clock is ticking down as you mine. Essentially, you've also got energy, so it's a little similar to like Stardew Valley. So like there's the clock advancing, and you've also got energy that every time as you dig, as you take damage, you're losing energy. Each room of the mine you go through, you're losing energy. So there's like at least two like different competing clocks that you're working on, and so it really encourages you to sort of eke out every little moment of efficiency as you're working through this mine. Like if you like shoot too much and crack a gem, like that might be the only gem in the mine. Like if you use your digger gun on a gem, it destroys it. If you hit a monster while you're carrying gems, you will drop them and potentially destroy them. So it's quite punishing in terms of how you're navigating this. The other trick is that this is in terms of the life sim, is that it is basically that the story is that you've started work on this remote island in Cornwall. It's this mining company. It's basically a company town. They've lured all these workers out there and trapped them, and you're at their whim essentially. Like they have all these restrictions, and you'll only get paid at the end of the day if you fill your quota. So at the start of the game, you have to find 5 gems to get paid. If you don't hit that quota, you'll still get charged, because even if you do get paid, it's going to take out your tax, your rents charged by the company, your equipment fees, your student loans, obviously. And so you might start out with like a big 90 pound check, and by the end of all of that, you've got £5 left. And that's all you can use to like buy a tuna sandwich from the shop, from the chippy, and try and get some of that energy back. So it's really tight economy here, and obviously it's reminiscent of games like Hardspace, Shipbreaker, or Animal Crossing, where you sort of, it throws you in the deep end, sort of drowning in debt at the start of the game, sort of gradually trying to claw your way out. And I said, one wrong move, one bad day can sort of send you cascading and spiraling. And I was about £400 in the black for quite some time for a couple of hours of play there. So it's pretty tricky. It's like there's so many different layers of these pain points and friction sort of being stacked on top of each other. And just when you think that you've figured it out, you've finally figured out a system, you've learnt the rules, the company will of course change the rules on you and sort of just turn up the boiling pot just a little bit more. So I think it does also like do a pretty good job of the satire. Like it's not just, I mean, it is obviously just a blatantly evil company, but the way in which that's depicted has some subtlety to it, and that it understands the sort of so all the small petty ways in which it sort of will grind people down, and the way it controls information. Like there's the one bit of information from the outside the island is there's the Sunday newspaper. When it's Sunday, you can go and read the newspaper. I remember the first one being something like, oh, the Conservatives are complaining that they're the underdogs despite the fact that they're in power for 15 years essentially. And so it understands that sort of conservative double think and hypocrisy that goes into these into these initiatives essentially. The other thing is that there's a strong sense of solidarity and worker solidarity. You're building relationships with other people on the island as you go. It's fairly linear. Every time you come across a person, you just talk to them. There'll be a bit of dialogue, and affection level goes up. It's not a particularly like deep system, but I think the writing is pretty genuine, and every time you do that, as you sort of start to fulfill these sort of mini quests, it will improve your life in pretty material ways and make the game ever so slightly easier. I think that ties into like those themes are brought together pretty well there. Right, so I mean, I definitely had some complaints about this game. It runs a little long, I think. It sort of overplays its ideas, but it's such a simple system. So it really draws out some depth to those mechanics in a really clever ways. I've discussed previously in with some board games like what game was it? Things where basically a timer, like a simple dice chucking game, can suddenly be elevated the moment you throw in a timer, and just these frictions can force you to recalculate and improvise in real time. That can just sort of elevate those mechanics in some really clever ways. I think this does that really well. It is, like I said, a solo designer, and I think it's a pretty tight little package. I mean, other than the length, I think the look of the sort of the pixel graphics, the sound is fairly simple, but quite effective as well. There's some nice music in there, and yeah, I think it's a great little package that's like just not getting any visibility really. And I mean, when we talk about games here, I don't want it to be like, we're not here to evangelize and advocate for games. That's always been a bit of an afterthought, but I do think this is one that should be getting talked about some more.
Well, like we said, we support indies here. So a game made by one person definitely sounds like an indie to me.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, a couple of final points here is that like one of the key mechanics is that you go to sleep each night, and that will regenerate some energy as you sleep overnight. But like it's somewhat random as to how well you sleep, and so like how good of a sleep you get can completely affect like the success of your day. Like it'll flash up this quick like blurb. Oh, you woke up early and couldn't get back to sleep, and you only regenerate 2 energy that day, and you've only got 3 pounds left, so you can't afford a sandwich, so you're really scraping by. So it does capture that really well. On the flip side, it does capture the joy of pooping on company time. You can go to the loo and regain an energy once per day.
It is true. That is one of the great joys of being on the clock. One of the few joys. Very cool. That's a Diggergun. Okay. I'm going to move on to my game. So you brought up a relatively new game. I'm once again digging into the retro sphere here. This one is in the 21st century, though, so you got to give me a little credit there. I am covering a little old game called Metroid Zero Mission from 2004. This is a action-adventure platformer game. One might call them a Metroidvania. It's right in the name right there. Of course, it's developed by Nintendo. Yep, it's by Nintendo R&D 1 team, if you're interested, and published by Nintendo, and it originally came out for the Game Boy Advance. Now, this is a game I didn't play at the time. I played it this time around on the Nintendo Classics platform, so you can go out and play it on the Switch right now, especially if you are subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online. It's part of the expansion pack, though. Just be aware there. Okay, so this game is really interesting to me. The Metroid kind of history is a little confused. It has a little short teaser intro screen at the beginning of the game. I feel like it's even shorter than the Super Metroid one, but it's implying that it's a prequel. But essentially, this is a remake of Metroid 1. This takes place on the very same planet Zebes, which Metroid 1 takes place in. It has the very same biomes, Bryn Star, Norfair, places like that. So if you're familiar with the original Metroid game, this is going to be very much super reminiscent to you. Now, thankfully, it's not an exact remake. They've remixed some of the layouts a little bit. But for instance, on the very first second that you can control Samus, you can walk left, and there's going to be a morph ball right there, just like you remembered. Now, things that are different. So This is obviously much higher res than the original NES game that you could possibly achieve, technically speaking. But because they've chosen to make the character sprite for Samus like really high res, she's actually like a decent percentage of the screen. Don't know if you recall Metroid 1 very closely right now, but let's just say that like Samus is like 1/30th of the screen in the original Metroid on NES, and she's more like 1/10 of the screen in GBA. So everything feels like a little bit claustrophobic.
You don't really have much situational awareness, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure this is to do with the sheer like physical constraint of the GBA screen being quite small. So I get it. Even though it's technically more powerful than the NES, you got like a 2-inch screen there. There's only so much zooming in you can do. I actually played this on the Nintendo Switch Lite. This is just personal preference for me, but I can't really play retro games on the Switch full size, even handheld, just because just the zooming in, it just blows it up too much. But the Nintendo Switch Lite is actually really cute, slightly smaller, and it gives off more of a PS Vita size flair. And due to that reason, the screen doesn't feel too blown out. It feels closer to the sensation. You can, kind of squint, and it feels like you're playing a GBA.
It's funny you say that because I bought my Switch 2, and my expectation was I'd be playing that, and I'd give my old Switch to the kid. But instead, she's using the Switch 2 to play Donkey Kong, while I just play retro games on the old Switch. And it's like the Switch 2 is just too big as a handheld. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
I cannot hold that thing up.
I kind of agree. I mean, not that I've played extensively with the Switch 2, but maybe Santa might be delivering that for Christmas, let's just say. But it is quite a bit larger. And even the Switch 1, like the normal size OG Switch, is a little bit too big to play those retro games, in my opinion, in handheld mode. It's just kind of just blown up too much. Anyways, I don't want to split hairs too much. That's personal taste. But this game is really cool. It brings things up with a lot of fresh, new sensibilities, not the least of which with Nintendo Classics platform, every retro game has save states. I think you're given like 4 or 5 save states. So this is something that you would have above and beyond what the Game Boy Advance gave you. Even without those save states, this game is quite easy. I very rarely died. And with save states, you can just like not die at all or recover it from it very quickly.
Is that part of the remake? Do you think? I haven't played the original Metroid. I don't remember. Like, was it easy at the time? Was most NES games were pretty hardcore.
Metroid is a lot slower than a more kind of hard as nails like action game. Like it's no Ninja Gaiden or like even like a Mega Man 3 or something like that. Yeah, it's quite a bit slower than that. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard, but you die a lot in that game. It's just more like a retro game. But this one, because it's quite a bit newer, I just kind of like breeze through the first 2 or 3 hours of the game. And basically there's zero to no friction until you reach the bosses. And when I reach a couple of the bosses, and some of the optional challenges, I did have even the slightest hint of friction. But if you make liberal use of the save states, you can kind of just breeze through this game. And that is one thing I heard. One of the complaints is that this game is particularly short. I haven't finished it. I only played about 4 hours of it. But over the time that I spent, like basically I'm just zip-zapping everywhere, finding upgrades easily without too much difficulty, solving the platforming challenges without too much difficulty. So it's a really like smooth, kind of like friction-free experience. One of the kind of quality of life improvements, you can arguably call it an improvement, is that there are these upgrades that you can find. In the original Metroid, you get upgrades by discovering these like kind of like statues of the ancients that are hidden throughout your terrain. And some of these statues that you find are just like literally a hint system. I'm not talking about just the map, the ones that give you the map, layout. I'm talking about like if you find some of these secrets, they will tell you where the next priority is. They'll point it out. They'll put a pin on the map,
Oh wow.
and they'll even put a pin on the map where you haven't unlocked a map yet. It'll just say it's in this biome, kind of in this area. And if that sounds familiar to you, I noticed that one of the very much newer Metroidvania games, it's the latest. What is it? The Prince of Persia, the side-scrolling one.
Oh,
Vania,
Lost Crown.
Lost Crown, 2D side-scrolling Prince of Persia game, which I love, by the way. That game is really, 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 really quite cool for a newer Metroidvania game. It also had a similar feature where it says, "Hey, you may want to check out this area next." So that makes the flow of the game even easier. So this game, overall, like it's apparently like the reviews were quite good. It received a lot of praise in the press at the time. In fact, Nintendo Power Magazine called it one of the best Nintendo games of all time, which is really odd because no one ever talks about Metroid Zero Mission. But I think it's praiseworthy. It plays smoothly. It looks great. All of the Metroid magic is there, other than the difficulty being dialed down quite a bit. Like, it's just a really technically proficient Metroidvania game. And it makes me, when I compare it to some of my newer Metroid experiences playing, Metroid Prime Remaster or Metroid Dread, which is the very latest dedicated Nintendo Switch Metroid game, you just like not having those load screens is just a miracle. So I'm really enjoying that. And this game is quite cool. If you have played the older Metroid games, especially the 2D ones, you can rely upon a lot of the old tricks that you might be familiar with. Are you familiar with the bomb jump method?
Vaguely, yeah. I've only played Super Metroid. I think is the only one of that series.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could do it in Super Metroid as well. But basically, I mentioned that one of the earlier upgrades you get is the morph ball, which lets you turn into basically like this, like a little pinball shape. And then later on, you unlock a little bomb, which you can drop only when you're in ball form. And if you time it right, you can make the bomb kind of bounce you in ball form upwards, and you can actually time it so that the bombs kind of go off in a succession up and up and up, that you can actually reach areas that are way, way higher than you could potentially reach just by using jump or even double jump. So this is a very old school trick, and I was very satisfied to see that you could utilize this. And I think I found like 4 or 5 of the upgrades utilizing that bomb jump technique. Despite the fact that when I found a power-up later, I realized that, this was designed to be using that power-up that I didn't have yet. So it allows you to sequence break.
Right. Excellent. Was it intended that the mind jump would be a usable thing? Or was it just like a quirk of the system?
I have to imagine that they kept it in there. Otherwise, they would have limited it in a way. You can only achieve that jumping technique by planting the bombs in a very specific rhythm, and they could have timed it so that you couldn't place those bombs in that particular rhythm.
Is that something you have to use though, right?
No.
Okay,
it's not something you have to use. It's not something they ever teach you to use. It's just an exploit that they have obviously intentionally left in or recreated from the old culture, school version. Right? Exactly. People know about it, so people use it. Just like certain types of games, they throw a bone to the retro players, right? They say, "Hey, you remember this type of trick?" The new Super Mario games have those sorts of things, right? The side-scrolling ones. So obviously this is warming my retro gamer heart here. Overall, it's a fantastic experience. I was very interested to read up when I did some research that as of February 2025, so just this year, Zero Mission has sold less than 500,000 copies in the United States. Maybe that's all that they had released Obviously, it's great that a lot more people are playing it due to Nintendo Switch Online. So kudos for Nintendo to release that on their online platform. But I was interested to see that that number was in the United States and in Canada as well. In Japan, they only ever sold 69,000 copies of this game. So about 1/5. I knew that Metroid was always much more popular outside of Japan than in its home country, but I didn't realize that the disparity was so large. So really, this was obviously throwing a bone to the Western market. Western market loves Metroid, and it just so happens that there's a brand new Metroid game coming out for the latest platform in just a month or two. So
I
that's
haven't
something.
watched the latest trailer yet. I know a lot of people are upset that there's a person talking in a Metroid game now, apparently.
I'm pretty much done talking about Metroid Zero Mission, but I did watch the Metroid Prime 4 video. I don't have a lot of history with Metroid Prime. I didn't play the whole series. I've only played Metroid Prime Remaster about a dozen hours within the last couple of years. And, it's a serviceable, cool 3D one of those games. But it's remarkable that the features that they're so proud of with this latest version of Metroid Prime number 4 that's just coming out are all features that were included in Halo Combat Evolved 30 years ago. Basically, big war scenes, NPCs that have dialogue, side characters that you meet with and fight alongside. These are all such ancient features. Very, very large, open and empty environments. These are all hallmarks of Halo Combat Evolved and many other action games of 30 years ago. I'm just really kind of shaking my head at Nintendo seeing, man, you're really not impressing on the technical level.
I mean, I think we were talking recently about probably the Halo remake and how there's this real trend towards just homogenizing all these AAA games. They all have to, hit these check boxes, and they all end up looking largely the same. I mean, how many Nintendo games now are like revolutionizing them by putting in a motorbike?
Yeah, exactly. That's the joke going on these days. But yeah, I think they're being held back a lot by the fact that this is also a Nintendo Switch 1 game.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. I just realized that when I watched this latest trailer. I thought it was going to be a dedicated Switch 2 release. They're pushing the envelope. They're, making the visuals as impressive as possible. But no, I think they like the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 are being hamstrung by having to support the last generation hardware.
I mean, that install base is just so huge. If you can meet that audience, then you may as well, right?
I agree. I know why they did that for business reasons, because they would not recoup the monetary investment, but you're not impressing on a technical level. Maybe I shouldn't have been expecting that of Nintendo. They impress by game design and character design, not necessarily technical prowess. So maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here. But I think their 2D Metroid design is still pretty solid. One more fact about Metroid Zero Mission. This game was written and directed by an individual called Yoshio Sakamoto. And this person has apparently worked on every Metroid game. The same person has worked on every Metroid game, except for Metroid 2 Return of Samus on the Game Boy. So that's what, like 15 Metroid games or something like that. So I thought that was an interesting fact. Obviously, there's a lot of trust in this individual, and they did a good job. Metroid Zero Mission is a solid entry. I like it quite a bit.
Speaking of Metroidvanias, I did just start playing Shadow Labyrinth, I think it's called, which is basically a 2D classic Metroidvania. It feels a little bit like sort of Nier Automata, but if the robot that's following you around was Pac-Man.
It's the gritty, dark Pac-Man reboot that we all wanted.
It feels pretty by the numbers so far. I don't really have much to add to that. It's doesn't control that well.
Yeah, I rented that from the library and played it for about an hour. Yeah, not much to report.
I mean, Metroidvanias they do scratch that itch, I guess. Like, just they have that formula that is incredibly satisfying. Seeing the map fill in and getting those completion bonuses up.
Hey man, I'm a sucker for it, but at least when you play Metroid, it's the original. So you see where it all came from.
Yeah, I have been playing a lot of retro games recently. I'm due for a roundup there, but I have been thinking that when I'm done, with playing all the Final Fantasy games in several years, probably like the Metroid series and the Castlevania series are two blind spots of mine that I really want to double back to.
Yeah, it's true. And these days, when it's a game that's both on Nintendo Switch online, or classics or another platform, I'm also tempted. Like, which platform should I play it on? Should I play the ROM, or on my retro consoles, or should I play it on something like Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo Classics? I thought for this one, since it's a real-time action game, I might as well play it on Nintendo Classics because I don't need the fast-forward feature to fast-forward through tedious, grinding like it was a RPG. I would mostly be playing in real-time. And I discovered that Nintendo Classics actually has a rewind feature.
Yes.
Which you can rewind like frame by frame by frame. I've never utilized it yet, but it looks pretty powerful. And maybe for a tight action game, you'd want such a feature. And like I mentioned before, it has the save states, so super easy.
The interface is really easy to use, yeah. And I keep telling myself I'm not going to use the rewind feature, but I mean, spoilers for the games I have been playing. Donkey Kong Country, that rewind comes in. It's real useful there.
Yeah, I say I don't use the rewind feature, which is true, but I liberally save scum with those save states all the time, so it's pretty much the same difference.
I have been making sure to save right before a boss in Final Fantasy, because man, when you can only save outside of a dungeon, I imagine it was pretty punishing back in the day. Well, you die to the boss, you got to do the whole thing again.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion before about remakes and playing ROMs, but in a lot of cases, this is just me checking off a box from my youth, right?
I already did it back then.
Yeah, exactly. I already invested dozens of hours back then. This is just me fulfilling that mission and just getting through it. I don't need to punish myself any further.
Absolutely.
All right. What do you think? Shall we move on to the dessert course?
Yeah, a little short today, but that's okay. I think we're due for a short episode. Let's see. Dessert. Yeah, I mean, I've not got a lot right now. I've been reading a few books that have been disappointing me lately, to be honest. And then I went to my TBR pile and read one that I knew that I would most likely like. It's been on there for a while. That is called A Memory Called Empire. So this is a sci-fi novel by Arkady Martin, I think you pronounce that. And it's basically... It is a sci-fi novel. There is a high concept sci-fi technology. In this case, it's called the Imago system, I think you pronounce it. That basically, like, if you've got an important job, like a ambassador in this case, you basically have like a digital construct of your predecessor sort of embedded in your minds to sort of talk you through, and like you get to basically retain all of their memories and experiences from these sort of important high profile jobs, essentially. And there is some interesting explorations in terms of how that affects the idea of the self, basically, sort of incorporating these other personalities into your own. But the book isn't really about that. Like it's definitely a plot point, but it's not about that technology. It's basically, I mean, it's this huge empire it takes place on the sort of the home planet of this huge sprawling space empire, and as empires want to do, they must keep expanding. And so the main character is from the perspective of this ambassador from a small sort of sovereign settlement that's at risk of being annexed, and is going to the big city to like solve the murder of her predecessor, but also try and prevent annexation, essentially. And so it feels like a sort of story that could have taken place in ancient Rome or Age of Exploration Britain. in that it's very much just about the culture more than the science of it at all. Like the idea of this empire, it feels like it's somewhat based on sort of Aztec, I want to say, like language and the words, but also where they communicate through sort of poetry. Is they like their language is largely communicated through mimetic poetry. It's a glyph based, and it dives more into the culture of this empire more than the technology that drives it. So I think that's quite interesting. Obviously, you got a whole this murder mystery afoot as well, and it's largely to do with this like people talking in boardrooms. Essentially, it's like one of those, feels a little bit like Dune, I guess, in that it's more about the politicking and the backstabbing rather than the scientific technology. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Fascinating exploration of the nature of empire, and just a fun murder mystery at the same time.
Yeah, I had actually read this book, part of it, in audiobook form a few months ago. So actually, a lot of what you're describing is very, very reminiscent to me. And yeah, the murder mystery aspect of it definitely encourages you to keep listening. And it's the whole concept of having an AI of a dead, deceased person is kind of interesting concept as well, especially because, like, I don't want to spoil too much, but kind of like things go wrong and it's sort of like questionable why the predecessor is not around anymore. So that part was definitely intriguing.
Yeah, I think it does get a little action heavy in the sort of the latter half. I kind of preferred it when it was more the politicking and sort of cultural exploration at the start. But there is a second book that I'm looking forward to reading.
I thought it was a little bit slow and dull, so I didn't pick it back up, but maybe
If you enjoy the
upon your
second half,
recommendation, I will. Cool. All right, I'm going to talk about a book as well of sorts. I'm going to be talking about a manga. This time I'm talking about shoujo manga again. This is called Nana. Nana is a manga. I've read the first 2 volumes. Nana is apparently the most popular shoujo manga of all time, as evidenced by its 21-volume run. 21 volumes is actually quite respectable for any manga, but almost unheard of for shoujo. Shoujo basically means like maiden or young woman, so these are like girls manga, essentially, which I enjoy reading. And the format of them is that they're mostly centered on romance. And the thing about romance is when you get together with the one that you're pining for, the story's basically over.
Tension's gone.
And that's why a lot of those other shoujo manga end up having short runs, because they kind of run out of material, right? Actually, that previous shoujo manga, romance manga that I covered, Kaguya-sama Love is War, actually ended up running for a long time after the couple got together, because it had this like ridiculous arc with like intrigue and like political machinations and just
and
a
board
whole
games,
lot of
apparently.
Board game design and a lot of like comedic dithering. It had like an epic conclusion. I was really pleased that I finished that.
Someone posted on Blue Sky this last week that there was I think it was Irish Gauge in Kaguya-sama.
It was just in the anime form. In the manga,
okay.
there are games in the background, but they're just like so low res that you can't see what's going on. There is one chapter that is just about game design, though, where one of the characters is a member of the board game club, and she tries to bring her club's game to the student council, which is like where the main characters hang out, and they basically the entire chapter is about them helping her refine her game design. So, appropriate to this podcast. Anyways, back to Nana. Nana is a really interesting series, and like Kaguya-sama, this is one that basically inverts a lot of the tropes of the series, of the genre. Unlike a lot of shoujo manga, the 2 central characters in this story are not high school girls. In fact, they are young women. One of them starts off as a high school girl just in the first chapter, and then pretty swiftly moves on into her, post-graduation, kind of starting out in the world. And the second volume is a lot more of her like branching out and moving to the big city, in this case being Tokyo. And it reminded me quite a bit of, in retrospect, of kind of like young adult the comedies like Friends, you know? Like in
Mm.
Friends, you have, your Monica and Rachel and Phoebe, and they're hanging out in these sort of like unlikely scenarios. And they're in this like ridiculously large apartment in New York, which somehow they can afford on their cafe waitress salaries or whatever. So unlikely scenarios, but that's what they're trying to sell you, right? Is they're trying to sell you on kind of the excitement of their starting out on their young adult journeys. And this is essentially what Nana is about. It's called Nana because there are two characters and they're both called Nana, which can be a little bit confusing, but it handles it really well. Basically, the first volume, the first half is entirely about one Nana, and the second volume is
Mm.
entirely about another. And spoiler alert: in the second volume, the two meet and become friends, and that's where their unlikely friendship starts. The first one is this like kind of more typical shoujo manga character. She's love crazed, she's bubbly, she's bright, she's a visual artist. She wants to go to art school with her art loving friends, and she's the kind of the more naive, typical protagonist that you would see. She comes from an average small town, and she's had this like long string of one-sided romances that have not worked out so well. So she promises to herself to develop more friendly relationships with men, not just falling in love with them right away and then dealing with the fallout. She promises she's going to become friends with a man before falling in love with them. And that's sort of the premise of the first half of the first volume. So the second half of the first volume is about Nana, the second one, who is seems a little bit more mature, even though they're the same age. She is the second Nana is a musician, and she's part of a up and coming rock band in the north of Japan, and she's in a relationship with the guitarist from the band, and basically they're committed, they're in love with each other, but the guitarist has an opportunity to move to the big city to join a more famous band, and he takes it. And so she's sort of like left on her own to pick up the pieces on her own. And she's more prickly, a little bit more goth, a little bit more hard edge. But she's got a lot of strong personality and, is really trying to stand on her own 2 feet. And she's a lot more like cynical than the other Nana. And that's the central pillar of this series. And the reason why it works so well is because these two are like diametrically opposed, that by the time they eventually meet, which they are, they're going to be like oil and water. They're an odd couple, but somehow the contrasts help them work together all the better. And it's actually really, really charming. So I won't cover the second volume except to say that it totally works. The characters gel, and there's all these really humorous situations, unexpected situations, and like I said, it just feels a little bit more mature because it's not dealing with high school love scenarios. It's dealing with kind of adult scenarios, similar to things that we as adults probably can all relate to, having gone through in our young adulthood. So this is a really long-running series. I am reading it in paperback form, but I think you could probably get this through either the Shonen Jump or the Viz app. It's probably not on Shonen Jump, but it's from Shueisha, which is the publisher that puts out Shonen Jump and Shoujo Beat and other things like that. I got it from Vancouver Public Library. Another cool thing about this series is that it like breaks the fourth wall, all the time. Like they're always joking at and talking to the reader, the audience members, about how the main character should be a better role model for the young girls that are reading it and things like that. So I really enjoy how much they're like poking at all the established tropes, and it's a really delightful series for any manga lover out there. So I recommend reading it. And all 21 volumes are out because this is an old series, but well worth reading even now.
Awesome.
Okay. that's it for me. I think we covered all three courses, right?
Yeah, there we go. Three
In
courses.
record time.
Yeah, okay. So, if you have any questions or comments on today's games, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
That's right. You can follow me at markyusa, MARKYUASA, .bsky.social. And yourself, Daniel?
Yes, you can find me at Blue Sky at Board Game Feast and the Omnigamers Club account there as well.
Right. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube yet, go check us out there. Like and subscribe to our episodes. We put them out on YouTube, every new episode that comes out. And if you're watching already on YouTube, you can catch some of our older episodes only in audio form on a podcatcher of your choosing. Go check us out, like and subscribe, and send us feedback there. We always like to hear about the games that you're playing, the books you're reading, or the manga you're reading as well. Let us know what you're enjoying. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for listening. And remember to have a balanced diet of games. Bye.
Bye.